Now available in paperback, John Haynes at Death's Door. The man who rules the world takes on the Greek god of death in this action-packed John Haynes series adventure. Pick up your copy of John Haynes at Death's Door at Amazon.com and other online booksellers everywhere. Over the course of the last week, your DC Comics, Warner Brothers, and the mainstream media have been escalating their campaign to malign Dwayne "The Rock" Johnson. Now, your mainstream media, DC Comics, and Warner Brothers want to try to say that your Dwayne "The Rock" Johnson is responsible for their tentpole superhero movie, Black Adam, failing. And the latest story that your mainstream media, DC Comics, and Warner Brothers are trying to run with is that your Dwayne "The Rock" Johnson went out here and went over the heads of the executive producer and director as related to the film Black Adam, and some sources are saying that your Dwayne "The Rock" Johnson also went out here and pitched his own campaign for the DC Cinematic Universe. Now, as somebody who has been studying the entertainment industry for over 25 years, I have to call BS on a lot of the alleged rumors as related to Dwayne "The Rock" Johnson and the issues that went on with the film Black Adam. Now, your Dwayne "The Rock" Johnson is a very popular actor and a box office draw, but at the end of the day in the film industry, there are two people who have power on set, and those are the executive producer who is financing the project, and the second person is the director who is shooting the film. So anything that happens on a set has to go through either the executive producer or the director, and it doesn't matter how much clout an actor has, they really have no final say on what happens at the end of the day with a film. So even if your Dwayne "The Rock" Johnson did go to the Warner Brothers CEO as alleged, it really had no impact on the final production of the film, because the people who have the power at the end of the day are the executive producer and the director, and they have the final say on what gets shot, what gets said on screen, and what gets put in the final film. So you have a lot of film people in Hollywood, again, wanting to try to make Dwayne "The Rock" Johnson an actor responsible for the failure of Black Adam, but he is only responsible for one part in the film, and that is the acting, and at the end of the day, the performance that he gives is based on the director. So at the end of the day, the director is the one responsible for the performance that your Dwayne Johnson gave in the film. And while your Dwayne Johnson, again, is a big wheel in Hollywood as related to box office, any sort of ideas that he proposes have to be approved by, again, the executive producer and the director. And when he goes out here and makes those suggestions, the executive producer and director can go out here and decide not to go along with them. Now, some people want to say your Dwayne Johnson has a big ego, and yes, there are actors out here with big egos, but when you are working on a production on set, even the actors with the biggest egos understand that the executive producer and the director, again, have the final say of what goes on in a production, because once that actor goes out here and signs that contract for said project, they agree to go out here and follow the directions of the executive producer and the director. And what I'm seeing here with what your Warner Brothers is doing with Dwayne "The Rock" Johnson is they're trying to make Dwayne Johnson the scapegoat for the failure of Black Adam, but I don't see him as the reason for the failure of Black Adam. No, the reason for the failure of Black Adam has to do with the executive producer at the end of the day, who, after a screening of a test run of the movie, got a negative reaction from the audience, and then your executive producer decided to finance another, I believe, 60 or 70 million for reshoots of the film in order to change the story. And it was those reshoots that basically put the movie Black Adam over budget and basically led to the film winding up not being able to perform well at the box office, because the original budget for Black Adam was, I believe, $190 million. And then after they had the test screening that was reviewed negatively by audiences, they wound up reshooting the film, and the film wound up costing $260 million. And again, your Dwayne "The Rock" Johnson, while he is a very rich actor and a very popular actor, he cannot go out here and get money greenlit by the studio. No, that is done by an executive, and only an executive can go out here and approve more money for a production. So you can't blame Dwayne Johnson for that whole sequence as related to Black Adam. No, that was all due to a white executive producer and a white executive. They were the ones who greenlit the reshoots that put the film over budget, but they don't want to take accountability for going out here and approving those reshoots. So what they want to do is go out here and make Dwayne Johnson the scapegoat for the failure of the film. Again, your Dwayne Johnson does not have the authority as to do anything as related to financing at Warner Brothers. He cannot go out here and get a project greenlit as related to getting the money approved, and he cannot go out here and get approval for a reshoot. No, those actions are done by the executive producer at the request of the director, and is the executive producer at the end of the day who went out here and approved that reshoot because they thought that the film wasn't good enough. Now, you also have people, again, wanting to say, oh, Dwayne Johnson went out here and overstepped his bounds by asking for that Henry Cavill cameo, but that Henry Cavill cameo really didn't hurt the film. In fact, that was one of the best decisions that your Dwayne suggested that actually led to people building up their anticipation, because it was that final end credit scene that really got a lot of comic fans hyped up. They got hyped up even though the movie was mid, because of that final scene at the end credits. That's what built up anticipation. Unfortunately, what happened as related to this whole thing with Henry Cavill was that your Warner Brothers became its own worst enemy once again. Now, your Warner Brothers has become its own enemy for over 40 years, and as I was seeing in a post Mr. Superboy made on a Facebook post, they have been messing up movies since the early days of the Superman franchise. Now, I remember back in the early 80s, we had your Superman 2, which was one of the best superhero sequels, and Richard Donner was putting together a masterpiece of a film, but your Warner Brothers executives did not like the darker tone of Superman 2, and they fired your Richard Donner in the middle of production and hired your Richard Lester to finish the film. And the end result was a film that was a 75% good movie that had a really wonky ending due to Richard Lester and Warner Brothers. But if you look at the Donner cut of Superman 2, and I saw the Donner cut of Superman 2 when I was 7 or 8 years old, and the Donner cut is far superior because they showed it on ABC back in the early 80s, and that Donner cut really shows what he knew he was doing as related to this film, but your Warner Brothers didn't trust him, and when they went out here and hired Richard Lester, your Warner Brothers decided they were going to change the tone, not only with the middle of Superman 2, but they were going to change the tone of Superman 3. And for Superman 3, your Warner Brothers decided to go out here and go with a lighter tone for their film, going to add even more bits of comedy, and they also decided to recruit Richard Pryor into the film, playing Gus, the computer savant. And this whole plot basically was a complete mess of a movie. And that's when your Margot Kidder decided she was out the door. And that's when they had to go out here and cast the Lana Lang to be in Superman 3, because Margot Kidder didn't want anything to do with it because the plot was absolutely ridiculous. And Superman 3 was a complete disaster of a film outside of the sequence that takes place in the junkyard between your bad Superman and Clark Kent, which was one of the great sequences of a superhero movie. And that whole sequence between your bad Superman and Clark Kent was iconic, but it was the only thing worth watching in that complete trash pile of a movie, because back in 1983, when I was 10 years old, I'm watching this movie. I knew it was junk, but as I studied the history of Superman 3 and saw how Warner Brothers and the Salkins basically destroyed this movie by trying to add these comedy elements, we didn't get the Superman movie we should have got, which was Superman versus Brainiac, but what we got was a hot mess of a movie that showed what happens when Warner Brothers executives interfered. And your Warner Brothers executives destroyed the Superman franchise after Superman 3, even though the late Christopher Reeve went out here and was making every effort to try to make a comeback for Superman's character. He went out here and put together the story for The Quest for Peace, and he put together a fantastic story for The Quest for Peace, but sadly, your Warner Brothers executives once again interfered, and as they interfered, they went out here and they cut the budget for Superman 4, The Quest for Peace, from the initial budget to a lower budget, and that led to and they also passed it over to the subsidiary, the Cannon Group, which is known for no-budget movies like American Ninja. And what happened was the production values for Superman 4 were of poorer quality, and what we got with Superman 4 was a complete disaster. But the original 131-minute version was considered to be better than the theatrical version, and the original 131-minute version, I believe that's the time it was considered to be the one that the director thought was good, even with the budget cuts and production issues. But what happened was Warner Brothers cut the film down, and we got the disaster known as Superman 4, and the Superman character, played by the late Christopher Reeve, went on to go out in obscurity instead of reviving the character the way the original late Christopher Reeve planned to do with the character. So Warner Brothers has been its own worst enemy since, I believe, 1981 as related to superhero movies, and they have been derailing franchises like the original Superman franchise, which is what they did in the 1980s, and the Batman franchise, which was going strong under Tim Burton. They also derailed that franchise back in around 93, 94, when they decided they didn't want Tim Burton to make the third Batman movie, and instead what they did was they brought in Joel Schumacher in around 93, 94. Even though Tim Burton stayed on as a producer, they brought in Joel Schumacher, and we got this weird, surreal vision of Gotham City, and we got Val Kilmer, then George Clooney, as Batman. And the decisions made by Warner Brothers executives to bring in Joel Schumacher, the nipples on the Batsuit and the crotch shots, this all turned the Batman franchise from a dark, gothic, and fantastic visuals under Tim Burton into a circus under your Joel Schumacher. And this whole thing led to the complete collapse of DC superhero movies and almost destroyed the entire superhero movie genre, because after the release of Batman and Robin, we saw the superhero movie genre on its way out, and many studios not looking to take the risk as related to it until 1998, when Wesley Snipes, an A-list star, went out here and revived the entire superhero movie genre with his masterpiece of a film, Blade. And if it wasn't for Blade, there wouldn't be a superhero movie genre today. And what's really sad here is that you have people looking to try to write hit pieces about Dwayne "The Rock" Johnson and trying to malign his name, when it was a black man who went out here and revived the superhero movie genre. And now they want to go out here and try to blame a black man for the failure of Black Adam, and trying to say, oh, it was all Dwayne "The Rock" Johnson's fault, when it was not Dwayne "The Rock" Johnson's fault, because Dwayne "The Rock" Johnson, again, yes, he's an A-list actor, he's an A-list performer, and he has a lot of clout as related to box office, but at the end of the day, the white male executives, they have the final say over how the money is spent and how the film is shot. Yes, your Dwayne Johnson, like every other actor out here, can make suggestions on what they want to have shot, but at the end of the day, it is the director who has a final say on what gets shot and how it's performed, and it is the executive producer who has the final say on how money is spent. But you've got all of these people writing all of these hit pieces, trying to go out here and trying to say, oh, it was Dwayne Johnson's fault that this movie failed. No, it wasn't Dwayne Johnson's fault, because if you know the entertainment industry like I do, you know that at the end of the day, again, it's the executive producer who signs off on everything, and the first thing that they sign off on is the screenplay. And when you have a executive producer, he has read that script from its first draft all the way to the pink pages, which are revised every day and handed to the actors. It is the executive producer who goes out here along with the director that decides what gets said. And what really sunk Black Adam as a movie was the fact that the screenplay was not well written. Yes, it was very true to the comic book source material. Unfortunately, what led to the movie struggling as a film was the fact that the characters, in many cases, were 2 to 1 dimensional, and the characters being 2 to 1 dimensional led to the film not being a compelling film, and this is one of the things that led to the film underperforming at the box office, because while the studio was upset that the film didn't perform well, the problem wasn't the performances by Dwayne Johnson. No, the problem was that hindered many Warner Brothers projects ever since they interfered with Richard Donner's Superman 2. You get executives who come in and they don't really focus on the screenplay. All they're thinking about is the concept, and what they thought was, oh, it's Dwayne Johnson as Black Adam, and that's going to go out here and be the hook. But if you don't have a strong story, there's nothing to hook the viewer. And that's what led to Black Adam not really performing very well. It was that story being really weak, and it was also the fact that we have superhero movie fatigue, because over the last, I say, about 15 years, we've had almost about 40 to 50 superhero movies, and the genre is getting really tired because we've been saturated with superhero products over the course of the last 15 years, and we've basically had about 10 or 12 concepts coming at us down the pipe, and that's a lot of stuff for even a diehard comic fan like myself to go out here and digest. I mean, I feel overwhelmed at times, and I'm a longtime comic fan, by all of this superhero product. I remember back in 2008, we only got two superhero movies. I think we got Iron Man and the Incredible Hulk, and that was about it. And that was enough for you to digest. But we've got so much stuff coming that the audience just can't process it all. But that goes over the head of the Warner Brothers executives. No, they want to sit here and say, oh, Dwayne Johnson's at fault for the failure of Black Adam. No, if you know the entertainment industry like I do, and you know the business of the entertainment industry, you can't sit there and say, oh, it was Dwayne Johnson that caused this movie to fail because he made some suggestions and he used some of his pull to bring in Henry Cavill. No, I can't say that that was the problem. No, when I look at the whole issue, there were issues with Warner Brothers for the last 40 years that led to the issues that they're having, and those issues that they're having are them being their own worst enemy and them going out here and looking to find somebody to blame instead of taking a look at their approaches to superhero movies and why they always wind up in the same paradigm over and over again. Because if you take a critical look at Warner Brothers over the last 40 years, they seem to sabotage themselves every time they get a popular franchise. They did this with Superman in the 80s. They did this with the Burton Batman in the 90s. And they also did it with the Snyderverse. But you want me to believe Dwayne Johnson is the bad guy here. And when I look at your pattern, it's looking like Warner Brothers and DC, time and time again, are the ones that go out here and screw up, but they want to try to go out here and gaslight people and make them think, oh, Dwayne Johnson's got a big ego, Dwayne Johnson did all this. No, Dwayne Johnson didn't do all of this on his own, and he couldn't do it on his own because he's not an executive producer. He's not a studio executive who can approve a budget. He is not anybody but an actor, and like in Sid Field's screenplay, it clearly states that everybody has their jobs. Writers like myself, all we do is write the script. Directors go out here and direct the film. Actors go out here and act the part. And again, the executive producer is the one who signs off on all of this. But what I see here with these people at Warner Brothers is nobody wants to be accountable for the underperformance of Black Adam. What they want to do is go out here and take a black man and make him the face of their failure because they don't want to take accountability for their failures. And on the flip side, many of them don't want your Dwayne Johnson to receive any credit for many of the better ideas because unfortunately, like the other Marvel Studios and the Marvel production companies that they were working with, they had no problem going out here and having Wesley Snipes be the one that got all the credit. What we have here is some racists in fandom and Warner Brothers who don't want a black man to get credit. And that's why they wanted to scuttle the whole idea that Dwayne Johnson was the one who was going to change the direction of the DC cinematic universe. They didn't like that idea of a black man going out here and being the one who was going to set course for their universe, and that's why they went out here and disrespected your Henry Cavill, because they didn't like the idea of a black man being the one who suggested this for a film that was going to be super mid, not understanding that that whole sequence was the thing that was building the anticipation, building the hype, and that hype was going well until the film started to not go out here and make the $800 or $900 million that people were anticipating, and wasn't the blockbuster that they wanted. Because I guarantee you, if this film was a blockbuster, we would be hearing a different story from your Warner Brothers. We would be hearing a different story from your James Gunn, because that's how shallow many in Hollywood are. They will sit there and say, oh, you're Dwayne Johnson, he's the bad guy here, But if this film made $1 billion, they would be writing different types of articles. And instead of hit pieces, they would be out here talking about how your Dwayne Johnson is the next Arnold Schwarzenegger. But they're writing the hit pieces because, one, they don't like the idea of a black man having any sort of power, and two, they don't like the idea of a black man taking a leadership role. And because they don't like the idea of a black man going out here and taking a leadership role, what they want to do with these hit pieces is demonize Dwayne Johnson, make it look like he's some sort of arrogant as related to his suggestions, and want to go out here and say this guy needs to be put in his place. That's what this is all about, and that's where the racism lies, because there have been white actors who have gone out here and done some of the similar things that Dwayne Johnson has done. They have gone out here and suggested actors to hire after another performer wasn't able to do a job. They have gone out here and suggested ideas as related to shooting a sequence. They have also sat down and talked to directors. They weren't considered to be overstepping their bounds. No, when they went out here and did this, it was considered their experience. It was considered them using their experience to help make a better film. But when you have a film like this, they want to make the black man the bad guy, because the whole idea of a black man having this kind of power, and some people say, oh, your Dwayne Johnson isn't black, he's half Samoan. No, he is black because his father is black, and as a black man, they didn't like the black man coming out here, going out here taking that leadership role, even though Dwayne Johnson has been taking leadership roles for many years, whether it be when he was in college and playing football, or when he was out here in the WWE. I mean, he's been taking leadership roles, and what they didn't like was he was taking a leadership role not on screen but behind the camera, and he was out here using his power as related to his image. And one of the things that I found to be interesting, they were saying, oh, Dwayne Johnson couldn't be beaten on screen. I'm like, did you watch Black Adam? I mean, he was beaten several times in the movie, and they wanted to make it look like, oh, it's wrong for him not to appear to be beaten. Well, when you watch Man of Steel or one of these Batman movies, these guys, again, are always made to be strong. And again, the hero is supposed to be strong. Now, you also have people complaining, oh, he was the reason why we couldn't have a Black Adam in the Shazam movie. Well, that was something that even I could see was a problem, because when you have an actor like Dwayne Johnson and he's playing the heel role as Black Adam, it really wasn't going to fit organically into a Shazam sequel, and that's why he was hesitant about it. And because if you really look at the movie Shazam, like I did when I reviewed it a couple of years ago, the film had a light humorous tone, and your Black Adam, he wouldn't have fit into that movie organically. It didn't matter if he was getting beat or losing. You can't have an intense, serious character with a comical character. It just doesn't flow organically, and that's why he wanted to do his own Black Adam movie. But the problem was the source material by Jeff Johns was a bit two-dimensional, and the characterizations, again, in the story, they just didn't have any depth. And again, it had to do with the screenwriting and, again, Warner Brothers production problems, which have plagued many of their superhero movies for over 40 years. When it came down to many of your Warner Brothers productions, the things that have undermined many of their films as related to their DC Comics characters have been the writing. It's never really been the acting, because, again, when Henry Cavill, he was solid as Superman. Your Gal Gadot was solid as Wonder Woman. Your Ben Affleck was solid as Batman, and your Ray Fisher was solid as Cyborg. And your Jason Momoa was solid as Aquaman. But what undermines many DC productions is the screenwriting, and the screenwriting has always been the bane over at Warner Brothers. But again, the screenwriting is signed off on by two people once again. the executive producer and the director, and it is the executive producer and the director who have the final say on what's produced. But many people, they go out here and they'll think that they buy into this propaganda put in these hit pieces, believing, oh, it's Dwayne Johnson that's the problem. No, Dwayne Johnson isn't the problem. No, what we're seeing is another symptom of Warner Brothers mismanagement, because your Warner Brothers has been going out here for over 40 years, messing up their own franchises, being their own worst enemy, and then looking to make a black man the scapegoat this time. And again, I find it interesting that they want to write all these hit pieces about Dwayne Johnson, but no one wrote hit pieces on Christopher Reeve when he was alive. No one wrote hit pieces on Tim Burton when he was alive. No one wrote hit pieces on Val Kilmer or George Clooney. And your George Clooney went out here and said he would never star in another superhero movie after Batman and Robin performed poorly at the box office. But there were no hit pieces attacking George Clooney as related to his statement. But your Dwayne Johnson, we've got lots of people making hit pieces saying that it was his massive ego that led to the failure of Black Adam, and also saying that it was his massive ego that had him looking to pitch his own DC cinematic universe. Well, lots of people go out here and make pitches as related to projects, and I talk about this in my screenplay, All About Marilyn. Yes, there are lots of pitches made, and that's just something that's done in the business. And your Dwayne Johnson, I believe, had the heart as related to rebuilding the DC cinematic universe's reputation, because he was looking to work with what was already there and already established. And from the reaction from audiences, they were anticipating Henry Cavill coming back. And your Warner Brothers had good press as related to the everything, but they wound up going out here and tripping over their own feet once again. And as they tripped over their own feet, they looked to go out here and make Dwayne Johnson the bad guy. And again, that just shows how racist this studio is, because here's a black man going out here once again trying to help a studio as related to its product. But because the studio looks like it has a culture of racism, they don't want to go out here and take the advice of someone who is a box office superstar, because they don't want a black man to be the one to get the credit. Now, this really reinforces Ray Fisher's point about a culture of racism being at your Warner Brothers, and it's clear to me that Ray Fisher was absolutely right as related to what's going on, because this smear campaign as related to Dwayne Johnson really shows that your Warner Brothers is not really interested in putting together the best product on merit. No, what they want to do is have the white males get all of the credit for their DC cinematic universe. And again, shows me how dysfunctional the executives over at Warner Brothers are, and how they really don't care about the fans or the source material. It seems like it's all about ego for them, even though they say Dwayne Johnson has an ego, because if you really were serious, you would take suggestions from someone who was starring in many box office hits over the last 20 years and was in one of the better superhero films as related to the struggling superhero genre at Warner Brothers. So I look at things as related to this demonization of Dwayne Johnson, and when I look at it from the big picture, everybody wants to make Dwayne the bad guy. But when I look at the pattern of failure as related to films since the early 80s, with Superman, with the Batman franchise, with the Catwoman movie with Halle Berry, and with the failure of the DC extended universe, I'm seeing where Warner Brothers is its own worst enemy, and they're looking like the problem here, not Dwayne Johnson, because you're trying to make it look like he's the bad guy, and you're failing miserably, because those comic fans and sci-fi fans like myself who have been buying these products for over 30 years and been watching these movies for over 30 years, we know the history of Warner Brothers. We know the history of bad projects. We know the history of problems on these productions. And we know that one actor cannot be the problem when you've had multiple actors who have been having problems. I mean, you have George Clooney who had problems. You had Christopher Reeve when he was alive who had problems. We had your Halle Berry who had problems. It's when you look at the common denominator at all of these movies, it's Warner Brothers who is its own worst enemy, and this is why people are getting burnt out at Warner Brothers and DC Studios, because they're seeing the common denominator is not Dwayne Johnson. They don't see him as the bad guy, because how is a guy a bad influence on your studio when he only did one film, when you've been messing up films and TV shows for the last 40 years? I mean, that's a critical question I have to ask those at Warner Brothers. You've been messing up for 40 years, but one guy is the problem who just did one film. You've been messing up franchises for over 40 years, but you want me to believe this. And again, this is why people like myself have been getting turned off from DC films and DC comics and DC products, because there's a culture of failure, and this culture of failure is one where, people don't want to take accountability, don't want to take responsibility, and instead what they look for is an easy scapegoat, and what they're looking for is to make another black man the bad guy. But I'm not buying it this time. And again, I'm not buying it because I know the history of this company, and I know, sadly, that this company, because they're racist, do not want to change. And since they do not want to change and get their stuff together, then I'm going to vote with my wallet and not watch any more DC cinematic projects, because I know all of those projects are going to be dysfunctional at this point. And since your DC, like a drug addict or an alcoholic, does not want to change and is on a road to rock bottom, I have to step aside and let them hit rock bottom, because enabling them by supporting more dysfunctional films like the upcoming Ezra Miller Flash only encourages them to produce more dysfunctional projects. And the fact that they're going to support Ezra Miller over Dwayne Johnson shows how completely backwards your Warner Brothers is, because if you're going to support a guy who's gone out here and participated in serious alleged violent crimes over a man who is actively cares about the product, wants to make it the best it can be, and you want to show him the door, then that shows me I need to walk away from Warner Brothers, because Warner Brothers and DC, that stands for dysfunctional comics, dysfunctional product. And if I want to see quality superheroes, I can't see that with a dysfunctional leadership under James Gunn and Peter Safran, or the guys who came before them. It's clearly there's a culture of dysfunction, and if I support that, I'm going to enable more dysfunction and encourage more dysfunction, and that's the thing that I don't want for superhero movies. And at this point, I believe that it's just time for a break from superhero movies, because people, as I see it, are getting burnt out on them, because we've been bombarded with so many movies that the point where these movies no longer, people don't care about them anymore. And if you can't answer that critical question, why should we care? And Black Adam couldn't answer that question due to the inept screenwriting. Then maybe it's time to stop making these movies until you can go out here and answer those three critical questions every screenwriter like myself has to answer before we put a finger to the keyboard. Who is the main character? What do they want? And most importantly, why should we care? Because I'm finding less reasons to care about DC superheroes, less reasons to care about DC superhero movies, and less reasons to care about DC product. And the reasons are because your DC is its own worst enemy, because many of the executives at Warner Brothers, they just don't see how they are part of the problem. They'll sit there and blame a Dwayne "The Rock" Johnson, an actor, somebody you paid to do work for you, not understanding as the executives, you are the ones who create the work. You are the ones responsible for the work, and nothing gets done unless you decide that it gets done. And the buck stops with these executives who really don't want to go out here and make quality products, because many of these executives, again, they look to go out here and coast on an IP instead of looking to make the best product possible. And again, when I'm looking at your DC cinematic universe, again, you can't blame Dwayne Johnson for a culture of failure. No, you have to go out here and own up to that culture, because it doesn't matter how many hit pieces you write. The whole thing is, all those hit pieces show how weak the executives at Warner Brothers are, and how they just refuse to take responsibility for their decades of incompetence. Now, if you want to try some of my action-packed black fantasy fiction on the SJS Direct imprint, like the ISIS series, the E-Steam series, the John Haynes series, and the books of the Spinsterella trilogy, and my vampire novel Eternal Night, you can find all those books on Amazon.com in paperback and Kindle format. You can also find those books at other online booksellers like Smashwords, the iBookstore, and Google Play. And if you want to see me make more videos like this, you can donate to my Patreon, my PayPal, or my Cash App by clicking the links in the description box. That's all I have to say for this video. You can comment, rate, and subscribe. Now available in paperback and e-readers, E-Steam Horror of the Hyena Woman. Hell's aspiring angel takes on a wicked werewolf in this action-packed all-new E-Steam series adventure. Get E-Steam Horror of the Hyena Woman in paperback and e-readers today. Now available in paperback and e-readers, ISIS Legacy. Sorority secrets of the goddess next door are revealed in this all-new ISIS series adventure. Get ISIS Legacy in paperback and e-readers at online booksellers everywhere.